on smart contracts, a paradigm shift. You're most welcome. My name is Trudy Mwanga, or Gertrude Mwanga, advocate, and I'll be moderating this session. The construction industry, let's start again. Are we ready to go? Okay, good. Basically, to contextualize the issue and conversation around contracts, we have to understand that the global construction market is, I think, worth $1.6 trillion as of 2020, and projected to grow to double that by 2030, right? In terms of consumption of materials, the building and construction industry globally has been said to be the single most important consumers, both in terms of materials, and generates more greenhouse gas emissions than any other sector, bar none. So it's been said that the rate at which countries are developing and urbanizing, we're building a Paris a week, essentially. And that has implications not only for materials and the environment, but also has brought up discussions and ideas as to new ways to approach the process and how it is managed. One of those areas, of course, is smart contracts. And to talk about it is why we're here. The industry is, as we all know, undergoing a transformative shift with the advent of smart contracts. These self-executing contracts, enabled by blockchain technology, have the potential to revolutionize the way construction projects are managed, executed, and regulated. This panel session aims to explore the profound impact of smart contracts on the construction sector, as well as the legal implications, challenges, and opportunities they present. I shall, for those who need to know, walk you through basic context in which we're approaching this subject, and then invite our panel of speakers, esteemed panel of speakers, to give us their insights and expertise on the matter. As I said, I'm Gertrude Mwanga, and I'm with the Green Building Council Uganda, co-founder and director, and it's part of the global network from the World Green Building Council, working to transform the building and built environment towards a much more low-carbon, environmentally friendly, climate-resilient practice. If we're considering the matter of the contracts, per contracts, the issue is the foundation of a successful construction project is a strong construction contract. The contract captures, as we all know, the scale of work, the parties, the process, and enables the completion of work, the delivery of materials, and the transfer of payments to contractors and subcontractors quickly and accurately. In so doing, it not only provides a framework for engagement, but it also facilitates collaboration between the parties and helps with tracking of key performance indicators. That is ideal. In reality, the construction process is often complex, fragmented, and has a very long supply chain. Historically, this has led to serious challenges from the lack of alignment between the contract terms, contractor performance, and owners' experience and expectations. It's in this context that the gift of smart contracts for construction has emerged. It's been said that the technology has advanced to a point that for many, these problems could and quite possibly should be a thing of the past through the implementation of smart contracts. Very basically, a smart contract is a piece of code or a computer program that incorporates the terms and conditions of a contract into computer code working on a network. The code is stored and executed on the blockchain to make it trustless and secure. Smart contracts have the ability to receive, store, and send funds, and also to call other smart contracts. The contract, in essence, self-executes based on if-then principles, whereby a situation is monitored, and if the conditions required are met, then it is executed. It may be said that the aim of smart contracts is to remove the human factor from decision-making, the human element having been proven in many cases to be the most unreliable and often error-prone. The question is, though, and this is the question that we're going to put to you and to our panels, is it realistic? Is it too futuristic and detached from the grit of construction sites? Is it good and or desirable and applicable to Uganda's particular context? And if it is, what does that mean for the future of the sector, the workforce, its engagement, training opportunities and provisions for the youth? With regards to the issue of sustainability, which we touched on at the beginning, Uganda has commitments under the o1FZmROHI1M, the Paris Agreement on Climate, and UN Sustainable Development Goals, in which we have committed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to move the country towards a much greener agenda, including, but not limited to, the transformation of the built environment towards a much more low-carbon, climate-resilient, environmentally sustainable, and inclusive built environment. Part of this work has involved greening the national building codes, a process I contributed to. But the question is, does this and the prospect of smart contracts support or negate that process? When considerations are not tangible, like nuts and bolts, will they still be prioritized? After all, if a computer or program is in charge, what do they care about climate change or pollution? Is that an issue we need to consider? Our panel will address these issues. Is code law? And should it be? In his 1999 book, Code and Other Laws of Cyberspace, Lawrence Lessig coined the phrase code is law and set off a whole debate around algorithmic governance. The issue is for Uganda and the legal profession here is, what is the intersection between code, law, and regulation? How does it work for this sector? Where is that balance for Uganda? Well, the engineers among you, and we have a presenter here, an expert in the field who's going to address the issues. Quantity surveyors, steeped in the process. What does the introduction of these new instruments, if we may call them that, mean for you in terms of your daily practice? What design choices are made or forfeited to accommodate the fact that somebody else has to code the program? These are the questions and many more to be discussed with our panel. Suffice it to say at this point, before we engage, whatever it is we may feel individually about the march of technology globally, the jury is out. Global trends suggest that the increase and support for smart contracts is on the rise. Smart contracts are legally binding in some US states, while other regions are still preparing for laws and regulations to make smart contracts and blockchain legally binding in all industrial sectors. Canada's activity has moved from the commercial to government sectors, with government sectors adopting blockchain technology to administer government contracts. Is this a trend that we need to see and we will see here? These are the issues. If so, when and how quickly is that going to install? In short, The growth, uptake, interest in, and support for blockchain by governments around the world is such that some have said that mainstream adoption of blockchain-based smart contracts is expected to mature in the next 5 years. On that note, please join me in welcoming our esteemed panel of speakers who will help us work through the issues, the points, what it is when we talk about a smart contract, how it operates, what does it mean, how to harness this base, and see how to make it work for yourselves in practice, for your clients, and ultimately for society. Please. Dr. and architect Emmanuel Sinabulies, President of Uganda Society of Architects, will walk us through the fundamentals of smart contracts, what they are, their advantages, and how they can streamline contractual relationships within the architectural domain. Next to him, we have Engineer Muhwezi, who is the president of the Uganda Institute of Professional Engineers, I believe, who will talk to us about how engineers are leveraging smart contracts to enhance project execution, mitigate risks, and foster collaboration. We do have another panelist who is currently not able to attend, but who's had an issue on the way here, but we're expected to join us. We have, however, also Milton Ochan, who is the chair of this construction cluster and managing partner at Milton and Company Advocates, who will work through both the issue of the legal implications and regulatory aspects of smart contracts, as well as guiding us on facilitating implementation and compliance, in particular exploring strategies for the adoption of smart contracts while ensuring that regulatory compliance, risk management, and contract administration is observed. I'll ask you to give a hand to our panel and invite them each to speak in turn. Take it away, Doctor.
Good afternoon to you all, and glad to see you here. I take it that with us here we have councils and people who are interested in the construction industry, but most importantly, those who have interfaced with frustration when it comes to managing contracts. So as I contribute today, I'll try as much as possible to put it in the layman's language, because we have all this jargon, all this language, all these documents, but when it comes down to implementation, you're dealing with the common person, wananchi, the muntu wa wansi. So the easier we understand this, the easier we can now accept it and make it part of our operations. Now, to start off, we need to place smart contracts in the context of the theme, which is, in a nutshell, disruption in construction. And as much as smart contracts are meant to be not only self-executing, but more so, everyone understands them as digital contracts. That means you have predetermined conditions, as she was sharing, that you just feed in, just plug into. But the truth of the matter is we operate in an environment where things go off along the way. So we need to ask ourselves, what are the usual factors that we look at when we're talking of smart contracts and how we can run them around here? To start off, we need to understand that as we talk of smart contracts, we have an environment which we are already existing and operating in. And that environment includes our legislation and regulation. That environment includes the government, but more so, that environment includes already ongoing or concurrent projects or contracts. So you need to ask yourself, when I'm talking of a smart contract, Am I bringing it in from the start on a fresh project? Am I bringing in along the way when I've gotten either frustration or I've picked up ideas on smart contracts and I want to incubate it in the project? Or am I referring to it as a precedent when I'm benchmarking on another scenario? So all these factors are not only time-based, but also are knowledge-based. In more developed countries, they've had a lot of scenarios where they've engaged with smart contracts and they've seen the pros and the cons of these contracts. But this is a very new phenomenon to us here. So we need to ask ourselves, in our construction industry, what can we pick from this to run with and understand it along the way, so that by the time the whole gospel of smart contracts comes to us, we know a little bit of it and it's not an alien. Now, to start off, we all know, I'm assuming, we all know that the main factor in disruption is along the production process. You have, and if you're to align it with smart contracts, you have this predetermined process that you think things are going to move from A to Z, but along the way, you get a financial glitch. Along the way, I, as the customer, I change my behavior. I start thinking that maybe this project isn't viable enough. Or maybe I'm dealing with the wrong council. Or maybe I'm starting to be speculative. I've been told that there's another new project coming. I'm holding off something. So you need to know along the process, many things can come in that we don't expect. In the line of, say, we predetermined all the stages as we are starting up this contract. Then also we need to look at the network links in terms of infrastructure and the disruption that happens there. Let's dissect and say, for example, we are having a smart contract for a satellite city. And you assume that we're going to have the roads in there, placed in, already put, water, power, and all those things. And those are going to form the foundation for people picking interest in the project and even the value for the project. But then along the way, an innovation comes up that instead of using, say, umeme, we can tap into a solar grid system. And that disrupts everything. Because you planned that as you're doing the roads, you're doing the power lines, you're doing the water, and now the system is all changing. And it's changing for the good. That's why I picked an example like that. It's not a disruption that is a negative one, but you didn't predetermine it. You thought you're going to walk the path of normal power lines. And along the way, you're now taking the path of, say, solar. Or, for example, if we're to pick up the third most common factor in smart contract disruption, is the change in demand. You have this contract, digitized as it is. It has, of course, benchmarked with best practices. And it has assumed that the market survey has predicted that this is the demand there. Then along the way, it changes. Say, for example, what we've been seeing in Dubai with the boom of the hotels because of the tourism. And then you realize that now there's a new shift that people are turning their apartments into Airbnbs. And now you didn't expect that, but it's in your face. So in summary, those are the three things I wanted to focus on. But I wanted to run further. Other things we shall talk about them as we have discourse. But I wanted to now break it further down to what are the advantages in going smart. If we are to assume that it's a predetermined, fixed arrangement, it will be fast. That's one. It will have a high level of transparency and trustworthy, because you know the document that I'm looking at that I want to sign is the same document that Tom, Dick, and Stephen has. So there is no scenario that the contract I have here is missing a page. You know those things happen. Someone comes and says, no, this is not what I signed, because some pages are missing. But when it's digital, there's no shortcut to it. And then in terms of the normal contracts that we have, at times you need to involve a third-party authenticator. I don't trust him, he's the client, he doesn't trust me well, I'm the contractor, and so let's get another person to be not just a witness, but to make sure this thing is authentic as an agreement. When it is smart, that part is removed. And that part can actually bring growth to brokerage and middlemen. So already that is taken out. And then it also comes in a new era where we're trying to deal with fraud. In construction, at times we're dealing with a lot of sums of money. And if something is digitized and well documented, it's easy to trace it. As compared to when we have the normal pen on Soviet contract, where I can easily deny, or I can easily push in things, or I can actually divert funds for something else. When it is smart, you assume that it is digitized and it is on the platform to be shared. When we look at the disadvantages, this being a new system that locally we haven't tested it a lot, most of the disadvantages are developed along the way. And most of them come from what we assumed as predetermined versus the reality in our operation world. But the default ones are to do with the limitations with our governments on accepting this. At times it's intentional because it's going to kubalabisa. For those who don't understand, it's going to expose the leaks, the failures in the system. So we play ignorance that we don't know those things, we don't understand them. But we know deep down that if this thing comes, there won't be avenues for me to do that. Then also the incompatibility of this with our standards and our laws. These words are catchy and nice, smart, green, sustainable. But the truth of the matter is some of our laws need to be updated. Some of our standards need to be revised. You don't want a scenario where someone takes you on and nullifies your contract on a technicality that is within the jurisdiction of the law that you're going by. You come with all your folders of the case, you have a solid case, and then someone says, but our law doesn't recognize this. Our standards say A, you brought B, you finished. So, as we shall discuss later, let me just take you through, because I've talked a lot, I was supposed to talk for 10 minutes. Let me take you through the gray areas that, from my experience, I think are areas we need to look at. We need to ask ourselves, we're in a world of cryptocurrencies. And when you're talking smart, you're not very far from crypto. But we know that some countries don't recognize cryptocurrencies. So if you're going to have a smart contract, how do you bring in these things? How do you accommodate that? And then we need to ask ourselves, how do these, as I mentioned earlier, that there are different stages how smart contracts come in, how do you loop it in with existing contracts? Because we won't assume that all the time smart contracts will be fresh and new. At times we want to introduce them along the way. How do we have a marriage of the existing and the new? And then when we're talking of smart contracts, for it to function properly, are we going to erase all old systems and start with a fresh page to avoid conflicts of, but this system says this, then this system says this? Or are we going to work out a transition of how we can gradually move from the norm to accommodate the smart? And then lastly, how shall we handle variations with this predetermined contractual system? Because we are trying to move away from the human element of, at times it's genuine variation, but at times it's an intentional variation to cause either delays or to earn more. You anticipated this project was going to cost $1 million, then along the way you find that there are hard rocks in the ground, and the geotechnical test, I'm sorry for going technical, that was done only went 3 meters, and then you're digging 4 meters and you're finding a huge rock. And now you're stuck. But then along the way, it's a variation. But the smart contract said no. We predetermined that you've done a geotechnical. It said the grounds are okay because we've done 3 meters. But then along the way, things have changed. So I'll leave those gray areas for discussion for the discourse. But I just wanted to preempt your minds of the directions we need to look at when we're going into smart contract vis-a-vis construction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor. That is really very enlightening, and I think it's going to be fruitful, very good discussion. Now, to walk us through and basically let us know the engineer's perspective, we have Engineer Muhwezi.
Thank you very much, Gertrude. Good afternoon to you all, ladies and gentlemen, in your respective capacities. I will pick it on from where the doctor left it, the gray areas. Ideally, smart contracts are a construct of Industry 4.0, which emphasized a lot of automation. The proponents of Industry 4.0 anticipated that it is time to completely automate everything there is in terms of process-to-process interaction. But as he has indicated, the circumstances within the construction are not static. They are always unforeseen. You may, even with good preparation, you cannot cater for all the conditions 100%. So there will always be those aspects where you need the human being to apply their mind and exercise judgment. And when you now look at the proponents of Industry 5.0, we are saying, let's appreciate the role of the human mind. Now, the concept of self-executing contracts, as you can see, was based on the mindset of the proponents of Industry 4.0. But when we look at the issues within construction projects, what is the headache of a project manager of a construction project? The headache of a project manager is delivery of the project on time and within budget. Because that's what the capital owner engages them for, to make sure that the project is done within time and within budget. But also, we need to reflect on some of the issues again there. Issues of timely payment of service providers, issues of transparency, issues of variations, especially from the client. The client's mind is always dynamic. You can actually agree on the final details on the project, and when the client has gone somewhere, they get new ideas and they get possessed by those ideas. They want you to incorporate them. Now, with the way projects have traditionally been conceptualized and implemented, the pen and paper, which we can call the 2D environment, it is difficult to have an interaction between the contractor, the engineer, the client, and the technology providers. Now, there are some aspects of smart contracts that are already being implemented. So overall, the smart contracts, the concept is futuristic, but progressively, there are some aspects that are being brought on board in order to deal with some of the issues. And when you see some of the projects, especially those which are funded by multilateral banks, now there is a shift to promote the building information modeling in order to facilitate interaction between the client, between the contractor, between the engineer, and between the other input providers. And this shift now starts to answer some aspects. Reduced surprise variations. Because in the 3D environment, the building information modeling environment, there is more interaction. And you can imagine you as a client, your ability, if you are the owner of this whole complex of Munyonyo, if you are able to see the building in good perspective, you are able to see where the heating ventilation systems will be, how they run against the water system, how they run against the electrical system. If you're able to visualize this as a client, then you are able to communicate your wishes in a good time before the contractor places order for expensive equipment, and then you later on cause a variation, which again will inconvenience the supply value chain, and you lose time, ultimately impacting on the initial objectives. So we see some shift into aspects, to make use of aspects of smart contracts in the digital platforms, but we do not see immediate uptake of the whole aspect of the self-execution, because there is still need for investment in people. There is still need to train and build capacity in dealing with digital platforms. But there are also still some aspects which require that the minds involved agree on certain things. Take an example, issues of payments. It may be the wish of the project parties that when goods are delivered to the project, the supplier is immediately paid. That now would be the self-execution, that the goods are delivered, you scan the delivery note at the warehouse, and the money is immediately transferred to the supplier. But we know in reality, the funds may have to wait for some 60 days, 90 days before this is effected. Or there may also be some issues related to quality which have to be managed before payment can be authorized. So now these are areas which require progressive efforts on all the parties before they embrace the aspect of smart contracts. And we also see that with now emphasis on mitigating effects of climate change, the move towards green buildings, green projects, you will expect that clients in this digital environment are also able to see the whole life cycle costs of their project when they operate within the 3D model and on digital platforms. And this is normally the biggest issue which clients will start experiencing when the project is handed over to them. But now with the digital platform, when there is a design change, immediately you'll also see what it would mean in terms of energy consumption for the project. And timely addressing these issues with this arrangement, of course, adds a lot of value. So I would like to close it at that overall,
find the, in interpreting contracts, of course, we know the parallel rule that the documents should speak for themselves without extrinsic factors to come and influence. But where there are gray areas, courts will try and look at the intention of the parties as close as possible. How do we deal with these smart contracts in interpreting the intention of the parties? Those are other areas that, and then the designing and everything. But let me go straight to the applicability of these smart contracts in Uganda. Gertrude did talk about the legal and regulatory framework to accommodate. generally speaking, smart contracts are like any other contracts. A contract is a contract. So in its own name and application, smart contracts would be applicable here. But again, Doctor did say, he raised the issue of the issue of legislation. Do we have laws that can support the application here in Uganda? First and foremost, of course, we have all these IT sector laws are applicable to smart contracts. For example, we can look at sections 10.3 of the Contracts Act. We read that together with section 2 of the Electronic Transactions Act to qualify this contract that is in data form to be a contract that is applicable. So for that purpose, that qualifies. Of course, we have all these laws of the Computer Misuse Act. We have the National Payment Systems Act. All these would be applicable for purposes of enforcement and applicability of these smart contracts. Now, having explained already that these smart contracts and cryptocurrency, they are married together. That is how they were designed. An engineer here told you the 4.0 revolution, and now the Internet of Things, commonly referred to as IoT. We are moving away from paper and going digital. So all things are moving in that direction. So when it comes to, we cannot look at smart contracts in isolation with issues of payments. In any case, one of the most important advantages of smart contracts is the issue of payment, that the payment is automatic. You're not going to go and start looking for, suing the contractor, suing the developer all the time for the money. So we need to look at this issue. For purposes of this discussion, let's focus on the issue of the money. And now, in light of the legislation, we look at the issue of cryptocurrency. It seems, well, I stand to be corrected because every day probably there's something coming up. It seems the case of Uganda, cryptocurrency has not yet been accepted and appreciated as a form of payment in our financial systems. I'll draw a case in point that was decided on the 24th of April, 2023. That case was filed by one of the lawyers in Kampala here, Silva Kayondo versus Bank of Uganda. And how did this case?
We will miss their presentation, but hopefully if they do submit it, we will share it. That brings a close to the comments by our esteemed panel of speakers. I am going to open the floor to anybody who has questions and happily receive them. Sorry, do you mind sharing your name and profession? Sorry.
Hello, forgive my manners. My name is Eric Mugarura Bwankosia. I work with the Bank of Uganda. So there seems to be the note that you can't have the smart contract without any other form of currency than crypto. So if we, as I understand, where we are going, we'll have some CBDC, some digital currency. Or right now, what you have is digital currency backed by fiat. What you have on your bank account, which you can transfer to somebody by mobile money or some other platform. So can't you have that form attached? Because if you have an account with a bank, someone initiates a transaction, then approves. So if you're attached to your smart contract, doesn't it answer that legally? That's one. Then two, I wanted to understand self-executing. What does it mean? Does it mean at the point of commencement of works, the letter is the system issues a letter and then all parties receive it? I would like to understand that. Thank you.
Let's take a couple of more questions and maybe then distribute them, circulate them to the panel. So,
thank you so much. I'm Peter Luburwa. I'm in private practice. I've done some few construction contracts and of course advisory. And you understand that in Uganda, we have some words which have over time become general across board, like Engalama, for instance. When you say Engalama, people who are in construction will understand it. it's a Uganda word, but over time it has gotten that national aspect, right? Even if when Gulu is saying Garama, someone who is there will understand it. So this smart contract, do you have maybe, is there a way the local engineers in Uganda, architects can have local terms so that they can fit those local terms into these terms of the contract? I don't know whether you get my point, because digitalization comes with the developer of the technology is foreign, maybe someone in USA or China, whatever it is. And the words used in those standard terms of the contract are in English. Some of them are generalized, but in English. And then here you are in Uganda, having a project of a Muganda man in Masaka somewhere. But since the technology has those standard English terms, this Muganda man somewhere in Masaka may miss out. I mean, may not be conversant with these standard terms in the technology. So maybe my final word is that if we can localize the digital, contracts. You can localize the digital contracts.
No, the point you're making is important. Localization, as with any system, is always important. Context matters. So
thank you so much.
Everything. So thank you very
Maybe
much.
you can also briefly comment about I saw in German there are robots which construct buildings. You feed in the designs, and then the robot carries out the construction according to the design, which is fed in that robot. Maybe if you can briefly comment about that. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
Yes, thank you very much. Joan, I work with UNRWA. And I want to pick up the same issue that Eric talked about, the fact that some of these contracts are self-executing. I just wanted to understand it better. In line with most of these contracts, that construction contracts need mobilization, need land acquisition. How is that incorporated into the smart contracts? Then the idea, when you talked about dispute resolutions, how about contractors' claims before you go to that stage of dispute resolutions? Engineers' claims, how are those handled? And employers' claims. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ali Sekatawa. I work with the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. My question is, if I follow what Mr. Muhwezi presented, do you still need a lawyer? Because you say there's a standard structure, you feed in milestones, and it's self-executing. So how relevant is the lawyer in the whole of this structure? Two, I see it's backed up by blockchain and all these other infrastructure. So has it been applied here in Uganda? And in what industry? Because it looks like maybe if I follow the traditional offer and acceptance principles, it's like the vending machine, maybe. Yes. That's my understanding if I go basic. So from a construction point, has it been used? And probably that's why the UNRWA people are asking, because I imagine how can you build an infrastructure around it for it to be operative in the road sector, or where I am in the oil and gas, we are doing a lot of construction. Thirdly, Mr. President, and that's why probably I came here, we are getting a lot of contract management issues with the engineers, at least in our sector. So I would be interested in how this can help the engineering industry here to sort out the contract management issues, because I think for some of them you clearly you see that they did not understand the contract they signed to, and therefore maybe this kind of automated solution could be an answer, but it looks far off in the future, in my view. If it's real, please advise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So basically, does code mean hands off? Self-executing, does that mean hands off?
Yeah.
Yes or no? And
Yes, I'm John Meremsha, Senior Counsel.
yes.
I'm happy I'm amongst. I'm not yet irrelevant. Because
No,
you
you're
see, for us,
another
we are
president
being
in our
relegated
midst.
to the periphery.
We have another president in our midst.
Mine actually is a continuation of my friend's question. In construction matters, there is always a clerk of works, issuance of certificates at every level to certify whether all terms have been complied with before payment is effected. Will this be done automatically at every stage? 2, you have to determine that a dispute has arisen at some stage, and you notify or you issue notification. Will the system determine that now I can detect a dispute, and therefore I'm referring it for adjudication, arbitration, or actual litigation? Then 3, there is still, I don't know whether it is skepticism or simply fearing the unknown. How far have you sensitized all stakeholders about this concept? For example, there is deliberate need to revisit our curriculum, the fundamentals of a contract, offer, acceptance, consideration. Are you bearing this in mind? What strategy are you having? Our judicial officers. Recently, we had a decision where an emoji, this one, acknowledged acceptance, and the contract was sealed. The courts have interpreted this sign. But here, have you some jurisprudence which is contemporaneous or to cover such areas? I rest my questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Former.
Thank you.
So, do we have another question?
Yeah.
We are time barred, so we're going to have to really gallop through the last set of questions. Yes, ladies first, of course. We have balance. This is a very balanced room.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Senior Counsel JMM, as we used to call
Sorry,
you.
may I ask you
My
keep
name-
it short, to the
Yes,
point?
it is very
because we're
short, and
going
it's
to-
one question.
we're running
My
out of
name
time.
is Winnie. I have never done construction law, and neither am I practicing it. I'm just learning. And my question kind of follows from what my Senior Counsel JMM has submitted on, and it's just one. It is in regard to, because I'm hearing this for the first time, which is still okay because we continue to learn. So I want to know the extent to which the regulators of this particular sector, I'm looking at lands and all the relevant stakeholders, have been engaged, especially from you as a team that has presented to us, or do I want to take it as something new that we should consider, or actually I am behind, it's already here and people have embarked on it? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
We'll take 2 very brief questions.
All right. Thank you so much. My
would
name is
ask you.
Hilary Ahimbisiwe, the head legal SMS. We apologize. Our panelist got issues on the way here. And I want to thank all of you, and also note the fact that this is not so alien. We have the Electronic Transactions Act that actually guides a bit of this, but we just need to, I think the legislators need to incorporate more of the missing gray areas of some of the laws we have. And I think this will be another right shift in the industry. Thank you.
May I just interject at this point, as an industry player who is involved in this, are you campaigning or asking for this? That would be an issue to move the dial. What was the final? Somebody had a question over here. Please. Could we have your question? We are going to get thrown out, literally, so we need to hurry up. Thank you.
Dean from Citadel. I'm a legal trainee. I just wanted to comment that there is a proposal to amend the Capital Markets Authority Act to provide the basis for the operation of blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies. And in that law, or that proposed amendment, there is also a platform which provides for smart contracts. So my question is, how are the relevant stakeholders preparing themselves? Have they reached out to Parliament to make sure that their interests are met? Things like contract management, how are they going to be incorporated into things like smart contracts within the Capital Markets Authority amendment, if it is to pass? Thank you very much.
So many questions. So, right, I think we should just have our panel answer the questions and literally just gallop through as best they can. Thank you all so much for your engagement and for your questions. Doctor.
All right. Thank you for those questions. I'll try to keep on those that are not legal. Otherwise, I might find myself in handcuffs when I get out of this place. Now, there was a question that Eric asked that, no, it wasn't Eric, it was Ali, that do we need the lawyers in this thing if this thing is smart? But you need to understand that even computers are fed to do what they do. Even the robots that are making 3D buildings or robotics in Germany are given permutations to work with. So definitely, for us to interpret these things, we need lawyers. That's a given. And then there was the issue that already we have digital currency backed up by fiat. So can't this be the supporting link to smart contracts to solve the financial aspect of smart contracts? We need to understand that smart contracts, by nature, they are predetermined. And the system that we have now for digital banking is different from what we're discussing. Because here you have, how can I put it, like a standing order. But that standing order happens when you've ticked boxes A, B, C, D. But we also have said that one of the disadvantages is that A, B, C, D at times changes because the industry keeps on fluctuating. So you have a scenario where you have a predetermined standing order being affected, and it brings you problems. Because as my colleague has mentioned, at times, yes, you might have a system that at this milestone of, say, finishing the foundation or finishing compensation of locals, you are going to pay this amount. But then along the way, you find out that some of that process was corrupted, but you didn't accommodate that. So we need a system that is designed for smart contracts so that it can loop in all those errors, or not errors, those glitches. Then Peter Luwalu, a private practitioner, asked about how can this be localized. And I personally think by the time you agree that this is the smart contract we're going with, all members have agreed to it. Meaning, me, the fundi who has never gone to school, I have a representative who can interpret this for me. Even if I don't have a smartphone, somehow there will be a platform. By the time we've agreed that we are going this path, there will be parameters to allow me to engage in that path. So, okay. So in that sense, if we are going to have words that all of us can understand, they'll have to be part of it. I will leave my friends to.
Yes, I invite the other two to please help us respond to the questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. I may not answer all the questions in the way they have been asked, but I will put bits and bits. The issue of site jargon, Ngarama and some others, will never go away. What is important is that the coding will always reflect site processes. So yes, you can say Engarama, but when it comes to giving the commands, the instructions, it will be given in a conventional way. Otherwise, site jargon is part and parcel of everything. Robotics in construction, that's what I talked about. The emphasis by proponents of Industry 4.0 that everything will run on the automation chain. But now reality has set in that even if you program a robot, there are certain things which require a human mind to deal with the existing circumstances. So even those robots, robots are good for high precision work, but they have limitations. External factors like land acquisition, issuance of certificates, etc., like my colleague has said, this system will be fed. But what is important is that the digital environment enhances efficiency in data processing. For instance, if I am laying a water pipe and I get a constraint along the way, when I change the route, so I feed data into the digital environment, and then the capital owner, the manufacturer, will see what does this mean in terms of change in quantities. So that is the aspect we bring in. And then the last was about contract management issues with engineers. There is one course, I think it must be FIDIC Module 4, where we are taught 10 mistakes in contract management, 10 mistakes. And one of the mistakes is implementing a contract which you have never read. So I think you are right. If there are mistakes being issues you are getting, it means that the colleagues have to be encouraged to read the contracts. You can't be a good contract manager when you don't understand the contract you are implementing. Otherwise, you become a liability, even to your employer. So I've taken that feedback, and take it from me that I'll also become a good ambassador in sensitization. And lastly, implementing smart contracts. As I've told you, there are some bits which we already see being implemented. Like in some projects, some development agencies specifically ask that the building information modeling should be part and parcel of the project arrangements. However, as I indicated in my conclusion, that we can't leapfrog wholly into the smart contract arrangement. There has to be step by step with capacity building, sensitization, so that people understand all the perspectives of what this smart contracts arrangement mean. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer and Doctor. Let me also try and run through. Mugarura, my brother there, my land brother asked, I think there's a question, self-executing. Joan also asked the same question. Okay, let me try. What happens is that once the smart contract is now written and there's a platform, I already said that. Let me also answer this while answering the question of contract administration and those issues that arise. Is that it's designed digitally to do certain things. Let's understand that we are moving away from the manual system, for example, where you have a project manager or an employer under, or the engineer under the FIDIC suites of contracts, who goes and issues instructions on behalf of the employer, certifies payment and so on and so forth. So in simple application, what this means is that in smart contracts is that all these things are written in codes. For example, if a certain event was supposed to take place exactly in 7 days, the computer has already fed, as he has said and designed, that within 7 days from the click of this button, this action is going to take place. Senior counsel did refer to issuance of notices. You realize, that there's need for a notice. you are supposed to do this by these days. What a human project manager would do is to write a notice, depending on the contractual framework, that within 7 days we are supposed to do this, you have not done that meticulously. So what this system does, the smart contract does that, at the stage of development, all these are coded in that platform, and it automatically happens. That is to the extent that is self-executing. With the exception of 3D buildings, at least I've witnessed 3D buildings in Dubai. So what happens is that there's still human participation, but it is minimized. So instead of the project manager writing that notice, the system automatically writes that notice to you. But most importantly also, because of the distributive ledger, with all these people with rights, stakeholders, and I think this goes to the question from UNRWA as well, because you as UNRWA, you'll be an employer. Let's say SMS Construction will be, the main contractor, and then other, whoever is authorized to be on that platform has access to that system. So once that notification goes out, you all receive it. If you have an issue within the system, you have the login credentials to actually notify the other party. That is why we are saying that smart contracts are coming to solve some of these problems. I did not receive the notice, or a notice is a condition precedent, like sometimes we've argued in construction disputes. Without that notice, the claim is not valid, it gets dismissed. But this system will come in to self-execute some of those things, that to the extent that it is designed to do. So that's my short answer regarding that. Peter, I think you've already been answered. Technology has a language. So Engalama will also have it will have its 0 and 1 to mean Engalama in the system. So it's not a physical document that you have to read, it is digital. So the language is digital also, the zeros and the ones and the codings. Joan, okay, I think I've answered Joan. Employers' claims, how do you handle that? I think with your login credentials as an employer, you then go ahead and you within that platform, you notify. But what is also very important that I think engineer mentioned is that one of the biggest advantages is that once the smart contract starts running, then those codes start to build up. There is a chain. And once locked, they are immutable. They can't go back and be open. So that is information that is recorded, that at any time with your login credentials, you can open and look at them. And they can be used for evidential value in the event that there is a dispute. So on that platform, you lodge your complaint. If time allowed, I would have read. Let me just read this quickly. Just one second. I got this from Investopedia. This is what it says. For dispute resolutions, whether a contractor or an employer, an ADR platform under smart contracts is tied to the thread that allows either party to the dispute and transaction. If one is not satisfied, you would find the dispute transaction button on the D app. D, small d, then app, because it's coded there. And a smart contract would execute dispute resolution actions. The blockchain network would select a group of mediators, arbitrators, or judges based on their expertise. They would pass their vote for judgment, and the smart contract would execute whatever action the group voted for. An example is the startup clause. Kleros created an app built on the Ethereum platform, because on the blockchain technology, you're either using Bitcoin or you're using the Ethereum. Their platform is an ADR application that randomly chooses vetted jurors. They are selected based on cryptocurrency they have staked and their qualifications in the dispute. More interesting, the judges have a specific number. Okay, 1 minute? Okay, thank you. Just 1 minute. We can talk more after this. The time is really not enough. My senior brother, Ali, yes, the lawyers will still be relevant, but you will have to adapt or adjust your qualifications to meet the demands that smart contracts come with. But still, yes, because these disputes have to be, somebody has to find a way of facilitating, because what is happening is that in this, it's a platform, it's a digital platform. But these digital platforms would still require human input. Just like my brother said, somebody has to press a button, somebody has to advise on what to do. So yes, but the standard is shifting from what we are doing ordinarily now to understanding deeper, how do smart contracts work? And if I have a dispute, which lawyer do I go to? Lawyers will always be relevant. The construction per se as an industry is very, very complex. Because there's a long value chain and there are very many circumstances that come. So the interpretation will definitely be necessary. Application in Uganda, in the construction industry, not yet. Contract management, that has already been dealt with. Senior counsel, I think we've answered most of your questions. Winnie, regulators of the sector, Hillary, SMS. I think that's all. Let's stop. But we are available. We can spare some more minutes after this session to answer some of those. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our panel. Please let's give them a hand. Sorry, to wrap it up and summarize and take us back to the title. We're talking about practicing in an age of disruption, specifically referring to smart contracts and whether or not they are a paradigm shift. From the discussions we've had from our panels and speakers, yes, it is a disruption, because clearly the process and what it entails is a foundational change in the way that the project owners and contractors will engage. However, having said that, as much as the benefits have been set out, and these are plenty, they are, they've been set out. Their inherent benefits are the reduced or complete avoidance of intermediary and related overall project costs, the greater transparency, the fact that stakeholders all have to agree, all have access to the blockchain, is that it? And there's a reduced complexity over time in terms of cost. There is, however, no magic solution or magic bullet. It is not that. Within this environment, and context does matter, there is a need to localize the technology and what it entails to this particular environment, all right? So as much as there's global and international enthusiasm and people have started infusing the practice into the operations, for Uganda, adoption, as we have been told by engineer, is going to have to happen progressively. Parts that work and that are compatible with our ecosystem of laws will be taken up, which means that there is still a gap to bridge. We need to ensure that the legislation and legal and regulatory frameworks are fit for the purpose and able to receive and provide for where the technology is going. There is a need, and I think it was actually specified by one of our speakers and also by a question, to educate, to sensitize, and to ensure that where not only regulators are up to speed, but also lecturers, teachers, trainers, people who are going to be responsible for forming the minds of future professionals are up to speed with what is going on in the world, and we do not get left behind. Ultimately, the question comes down to the scale of operations in issue. The majority of Ugandans are self-builders. I'm not sure that they're going to be concerned about smart contracts. However, the sector is growing, and with the fast-growing population and the rate of urbanization and the influx of international interest in projects, this is going to be a reality that most of you are going to have to face. And so, as we've been told, you need to upskill and deal with it. Sorry.
I feel like there's a question that came up 3 times and we kind of dodged it, about sensitization to the public.
Yes.
Some pointers. We can incorporate this in curriculums in universities as a course on smart contracts. 2, we can get the carrot and the rabbit approach, in the sense that we get URA to tell them that, look here, there's a potential to get money from this. Push for this agenda and follow the trail of money. That way, they will even help us take it to parliament on their own. 3, go to the local man and pick out parts of the smart contract that make sense to them. Then along the way, it will be like how we used to go to the shop to buy sugar. You sing sugar so that you don't forget along the way. It will become a song. parting shots.
Thank you. So ultimately, those of you are going to have to, those of you who are either going to fulfill legal practice or advisory roles, you'll have to advise your clients as to, their contract, their project, size of projects, the complexity. There's a need to critically evaluate the complexity of specifications and to ensure that there's trust between the parties. Make sure that, look at the interdependencies, especially the practicalities. There's a need to build capabilities for sure. And that will include not only the digital and computer skills that people need, but also that you have a strong enough software development team and people who can carry and anchor any future projects. There's a need, I think, in the whole, I know the individual projects are taking it up. Pilot implementation.
Gertrude, just in 30 seconds, where I'm seated, my heart is not well settled. One small thing, 30 seconds. We should distinguish between self-executing contracts and execution of works.
Yes.
Those are two different things. So when we're talking about a self-executing contract, is that, of course, there are parts that, for example, in a relationship where there is an employer and a contractor who is supposed to build, there are physical works which are going to take place. There's no doubt. But what the smart contract does, in its distribution of responsibilities, some of those are coded, because even for that milestone, for the smart contract to determine that this milestone has been achieved, somebody has to make that physical effort. I gave an example of sending notices or anything else within that contract. So the contract itself is self-executing in a sense that if there are things that have to be done within that contract, the system is developed to do certain things. Physical works are being done, drones will be deployed, information will be fed on that platform. So that information will now be gathered together and the contract will self-execute it. So if it is payment, it will effect payment. I think that is very important to distinguish.
That's actually true.
Otherwise, we shall start wondering, how does a contract start to build? You know what I mean?
Yes. No, it's the idea that it is built around the if-then principles or if-then semantics, where if condition A is met, then payment will be paid out automatically. However, as most people know, if you've ever gone to a tailor, you've said, make me a pair of trousers. What that trouser looks like at the end of the day may be anyone's guess. So there's a need always for maybe the intervention of humans. Thank you so much, everybody. Why should you consider this? I've been given a time thing. You should consider it because it is where the world is going. And professionally and otherwise, you need to make sure that you're ready for those changes. Thank you all for your time. Thank you all for having me here. Thank you for the questions. And thank you for your engagement and discussion.
Gertrude, we apologize to the insurance panel. We've entered into your time. We started also slightly late. Please accept our apologies.
Terribly sorry.
My lord, accept our apologies.
Panel, thank you so much.
You will be my lord one day. It's okay.